This is Kanzenshuu, the podcast, episode 329 for the week of April 7th, 2013. What up, folks? Welcome to Kanzenshuu,
the podcast,
an extension of the all-encompassing Dragon Ball fan site,
Kanzenshuu.
We cover anything and everything Dragon Ball in hopes of enlightening and a little bit of entertaining. Feels like it's been an extraordinarily long time since the last episode, even though it's only been an extra day compared to when we usually set things, because last episode was Battle of Gods Day. That was a week and a day ago. Here we are. We return in your ears a week later with more Battle of Gods content. My name is Mike VegettoEX, and joining me to talk more about the amazing Dragon Ball-ness of the world right now. Let's start yonder across large oceans. Julian, all the way from Japan. Welcome.
Yo.
What's up, dude?
Well, you know, Sunday night, it's late. I have an entrance ceremony to attend tomorrow for my new fresh-faced high school students who are actually like the equivalent of 10th grade in the US, but
right.
You know, they're still entering high school for the first time, so it's special.
Gotcha. Your high school is 10th through 12th?
Pretty much all Japanese high schools are, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, please indoctrinate them to the ways of Kanzenshuu.
I will try and see if there are any fans in the midst.
I want to get the younger Japanese fan perspective, so you can be all creepy teacher. We're like, hey kid, you want to come over to my house and record a podcast?
Yeah, that'll get me fired.
That's what we need.
That other voice you hear joining us halfway across this lovely country right here, the USOA. Heath, the Hujio. What's up, dude?
Oh, not much. Went to a wedding last night, so feeling that this morning, but otherwise things are good.
Yeah, I thought you did it wrong. You're supposed to do coffee in the morning, not before bed.
I know. I was like, yeah, I need to stay awake at this thing so we can drive home. So
I see how it is.
Yeah.
All right. Are you ready? Are you able? Are you willing?
Oh, I am completely, because I am not the one that is worse for wear in this household.
Okay. It's the baby, right?
Yes. Very much so.
Okay. All right. So we got the three dudes. Is this like the third week in a row it's been the three of us?
The three
I think
amigos.
so.
Huh. All right,
we have
then.
to do the dance.
Well, I'll have to boot one of you and get Mary back on the show at some point. And I want to try and hit up Jake from Jupiter at some point. Did you see Jake picked up that, was it The Strongest Inquiry book?
Yeah, he said he regretted it immediately, right?
Yeah, I think so. So I want to get his thoughts on that book at some point.
Yes.
All right. So, folks, we got a lot of cool stuff to cover. I mentioned more Battle of Gods. I kind of alluded to it last week. I wasn't specifically planning on doing it the very next week, but I think it's a great thing to cover. I know a lot of you folks have been getting in your official movie guide for Battle of Gods. Mine hasn't arrived yet, but I picked the slow tracking because, well, Julian can just buy one and tell me what's in it. So we are going to cover really cool stuff about Battle of Gods, which is, if you don't know, and if you don't know, there's a large rock you need to come out from underneath as a Dragon Ball fan. The first new theatrical film for the franchise in 17 years. What we're covering this week is, let's call it like the proto Battle of Gods, or the rough draft of Battle of Gods, from all the reference materials and all the interviews that Julian has been laboring over for weeks and weeks and weeks. We have an idea of what the movie started out as and could have been. So there's about 4 or 5 main concepts that we want to hit, explain what they are, how they could have affected the movie, how it did affect the final draft of the movie, and that's great times. We gave you some hints last week. You get all the depth this week. We have some regular news for you, and that's pretty much an episode. So, gentlemen, let's jump to news. So we have various updates on Battle of Gods in terms of news and various other things in terms of news. Julian, I'm going to start with you. We have a previous update on this story and then one that it's been a weird week for a variety of us that we just haven't gotten to yet. So let's start with they were on track to beat this goal, and it seems like they are still on track to beat this goal.
Yes, so based on their first day attendance alone for Battle of Gods, it was already being anticipated that the movie would break its goal of 3 billion yen, which we talked about previously with the article in Bunkatsushin. So by 1 p.m. on March 30th, now this is the first day that the film was out, not even really halfway over It was already at 47.3% of One Piece Film Z first day gross, and that was this past December. Now, One Piece being a huge property in Japan right now, you know, Dragon Ball just couldn't quite make it that far, but that movie did really, really well, and that film reached a gross of 6.85 billion yen over its entire run, and that's, you know, more than double what they're aiming for with Battle of Gods. So, continuing on this pace, it was being seen as certain that it would pass that goal of 3 billion yen. Now, it did break down a little bit the audience, that it seemed to be centered around parents bringing their children, with adults ranging from their late 20s to their 50s.
We are square, again, we are square in the middle of this intended audience here. I love it.
Yes. You know, it's good times. I think they're really pushing for fans of all stripes, new
totally.
and old, and everyone in between, to be able to enjoy the film. So it did, one of the two articles also went into a little bit of detail about the first day event at Marunouchi Toei in Tokyo, just with some of the voice actors like Masako Nozawa, Koichi Yamadera, which is the voice of the villain Beerus, Masaharu Sato playing Kame Sennin, Ryo Horikawa as Vegeta, and Toshio Furukawa as Piccolo, and Shokotan, the ubiquitous guest. And of course, being her usual quirky and slightly spastic self, she was, how should I put this? Okay, she was talking about how she was standing in the most sacred place in the universe, and also requested that Vegeta get angry at her. And when Horikawa humored her, she said a fantasy that she'd had of all her life has come true.
You know, you almost border on making fun of her, but let's be honest. If any of us were standing between Masako Nozawa and Ryo Horikawa, and either of them said anything to us, come on.
That'd be pretty cool, yeah.
Come on. All right, so that was kind of the initial on track, looking good in terms of the goal, some movie events taking place. This is a little bit that we haven't quite formally gotten to on the website, but Julian, we have some additional attendance figures and money figures and stuff.
Yes, so we had an update. So as of Wednesday, the 3rd of April, which is this past Wednesday by the time you are listening to this, if you're listening to it when it first comes out. Anyway, the film had already reached attendance of roughly 990,000 people, and was seen as certain to reach 1 million people on Thursday, and a later update in fact confirmed that it did reach 1 million people on Thursday, its 6th day in theaters, making it the fastest movie this year in Japan to reach that milestone. The precise numbers as of Wednesday, again, the 5th day in theaters, stood at attendance of 988,790 and gross revenue of 1,146,467,600 yen. I love that I have to put and 600 yen. Just fishing out the change from your pocket. You know?
How
right.
very specific they are.
Yeah, it is.
So other family-oriented films of the same spring vacation period were doing well, like the Doraemon film for this time, as well as Wreck-It Ralph, which has been renamed Sugar Rush in Japan. I don't know why. You know, a few years ago when Up came out, they renamed it Grandpa Carl's Flying House or something like that.
Really? I didn't know that. That's weird.
Yeah, why? But anyway, but yes, so it gave a little bit more information about the audience seeing the Dragon Ball film, that not only did it have many parents taking their children to see the movie, but it's also attracting older fans of the series, as well as groups of women in their teens to early 20s. Truly demonstrating its strength across generations. Well, you have to imagine there's the Mary-type fangirls in there as well, I think.
Absolutely.
I mean, Toriyama's talked in the past about how, you know, there was Trunks and Vegeta and even Piccolo to an extent that were popular with girls. And while it's very much skewed towards the male demographic, there are female fans, and they seem to be coming out in force.
Very nice.
Movie.
A little bit of this not news, but sort of news and content stuff. We had the 6th Please Tell Us Akira Toriyama Sensei question. That was about romance. We had a couple new interviews that we put up, and one of them contains a tidbit we're going to be talking about in the topic. So we'll skip aside a little bit here. I'm going to hit you up. Zenkai Battle Royale. It's the kind of thing we knew was coming, but then the official website for the game went and just plopped it all up anyway ahead of the schedule we figured it would adhere to, which is usually Mondays in Weekly Shonen Jump. Anyway, last month's issue of V-Jump said, is the god of the Saya going to be coming to the game? And yes, Super Saiyan God Son Goku is indeed coming to Zenkai Battle Royale. Had a giant picture of him on the site and a bunch of little moves. Julian, I loved your attempts to figure out translations of the moves, but it seems like they're not even really formal names. It's more of a description of an attack as a formal title for a name, like the breaking through the limit Kamehameha and the, oh god, what was the other one where it's like, you are moving really fast technique?
Yes. Well, then they have something for Mr. Satan, like, look at that or something.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
look over there.
If it's
that
an exclamation, I can see it, but some of these are just, they're not even trying.
Yeah. Well,
it's
I
probably
suppose
still
they're
in
focused more
development.
on the substance rather than the style aspect of things,
so.
but still.
So, again, the usual spiel, Zenkai Battle Royale. It's been going for a while now. It's still getting updates. There is no home port announced. We will certainly take a home port if and when it is announced. Moving on, Heath, why don't you take us to, I don't want to say related territory, but it's also video game stuff.
Video game stuffage. Issue number 18 of Weekly Shonen Jump for 2013 confirmed that Project vs. J was officially being retitled J Stars Victory Versus. It would also feature Naruto Uzumaki and, obviously from Naruto. So now we have the plethora of all J Stars essentially in one place.
Well, but we may get more in the future.
Oh, I'm sure we will. This will be very ongoing, I have a feeling.
Now, Julian, this kind of ties in with news that we can't really cover yet because your area is behind a week.
Yeah, so Kansai TV is a local affiliate of Fuji TV for Kansai area in Japan, and they will often preempt their programming for things like Hanshin Tigers games. And so because of that, we're a week behind, and I won't get to see this until next weekend.
So, I mean, that stinks, but related to this story, we did hear, it's actually Famitsu that seemed to announce it, that during the Dream 9 Super Collaboration Special, they were going to show the first footage of the game. And, well, you don't get it until next week, so I guess it's to the internet for us.
Yay.
Yay, boo-hoo. Right. So we'll keep up on that. Julian, why don't you give us a little breakdown of, it was a new release, but it's kind of news because there was no information about what was actually going to be in this damn book, but we know it's in Dragon Ball SD Volume 1 now.
Yes, because I bought it.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, so on April 4th, 2013, the first volume of Dragon Ball SD came out. It's the first compilation volume for the spin-off, written by Naho Oishi and overseen by Akira Toriyama. Now, this release happens to be in full color and starts with the first chapter of the reboot of the series, with the first 2012 issue. I believe that's when the magazine Saikyo Jump went monthly.
Correct. In 2011, it was a quarterly magazine. So Dragon Ball SD had 4 chapters. The first, was it Training with Krillin it started
Yes.
with?
Yes,
Okay.
with Kame-Senin.
Okay, so there's that. Then it jumped all the way to Frieza, and then it did the Cell fight, and then it did the Majin Buu fight, and then when Saikyo Jump relaunched as a monthly magazine, they rebooted SD, and they just started at the beginning of the series and took more time in each chapter to kind of flesh out those stories rather than cramming basically half a story arc into one chapter. So I don't want to consider those 4 chapters lost, but they have not been compiled at this point.
Yes. Well, even so, they do leave out a lot, and it's not pausing at any point for breathing room, and they skip over quite a bit of stuff.
Well, I know, but that's the internal contents of the chapters and not the, well, now these 4 chapters, if you didn't buy Saikyo Jump, then, well,
Yeah.
out of luck right now.
Yep. So the volume is in full color, and it comes with a couple of bonus things, including a greeting and illustration from Akira Toriyama congratulating Naho Oishi on her first volume of Dragon Ball SD. And there's also a Me Back Then comic in the style of Akira Toriyama's old occasional interstitial segments from the manga, talking about when she first got the opportunity to work on this series. And also talking about the artistic freedom which she thought maybe she had and didn't get to exercise in the end.
Yeah, I think we need to do a Dragon Ball SD catch-up. I know we reviewed all the quarterly chapters, and I think we started with the monthly, and then we all just threw up our hands and stopped caring. So now that there's a compilation version, maybe we can do an SD Volume 1 review at some point, and then we can cover a little bit of that extra stuff, too.
Does that mean that I actually have to buy it?
Yep.
Okay. I'll add that to the list.
All right, just another one for the pile. Or you can just sit out that episode. I mean, doesn't matter.
I'll do either. I'm not opposed to buying content.
The apathy is overwhelming here. Right.
I already own it.
Right. So, well, you're recruited. Maybe I can get Mary to do that show, and Heath can just...
Yay, Mary would be my hero.
All right. Heath, why don't you tell us what we don't know about Europe?
What don't we know? When Namco Bandai brought the Dragon Ball video game license back in-house from Atari back in 2009, the American branch of the company, heavily promoted the franchise, and we had all these upcoming games over the course of, the next year.
Yeah, they were really heavy with it. I mean, we were able to get review copies back then, and I think they even send some little gashapon and stuff. They're like, please cover our stuff, and then after that first year, it's, what's Dragon Ball?
Yeah, and we've even talked to them, and they're like, yeah, we'll get back to you. But promotions just significantly dropped off the map here in the US, and you haven't really seen a whole lot. But the European branch still going strong all the time. Huge mix of fans over there. There's always something going on, some huge hype. And in fact, we have even more coming our way from Europe. On their Facebook page, which is the European branch for Namco Bandai, correct? They posted up this nice little tease, I guess we could call it. The plan to conquer the world will soon be complete. Get ready. And it was posted under Dragon Ball Games. So, of course, what is this? Well, speculation went haywire. Is it Dragon Ball Heroes Ultimate Mission? J-Star's Victory Versus? Could it be some tap battle? Zenkai Battle Royale? We just really don't know, and hopefully we will soon.
Yeah, I think they're really trying to get the like count up to 100,000 on that page. And the thing is, their Big Gamers Day last year is what gave us DBZ for Connect, the official reveal. This year, it did happen, and I didn't go, so I'm not under embargo for anything, so what the hell do I care? I do know that they did not reveal any... let me say that again. They did not reveal any DBZ stuff at the event this year. They, of course, did have some other stuff, but that stuff is embargoed, so you can't really embargo something that doesn't exist, and I wasn't there, but I do have confirmation, so bleh. There you go.
Confirmed.
Confirmed. Okay. Lack of confirmation.
Yay.
So it does sound like they're leading up to something, but it isn't necessarily this month or this week or anything like that.
Well, there you go.
So we will keep you posted.
Yepers. In other video game news, this has been fun to keep track of. You were just talking about Ultimate Mission on the Japanese Nintendo 3DS. Last week was its full month. Kind of fell off one of the charts, the Media Create chart. It did pop up on the Famitsu sales chart way down at number 22. It came back on the Media Create list this week, and it did another 8,924 copies, so just about 9,000 copies. And that, of course, lets us plug back in, do a little math. How many did it do the fourth week that the Media Create list didn't report on? So we get a final number of, right now, after 5 weeks, it's done 140,208 copies, 2 of those being myself and Jake, and I can't even play the game. So it's crazy that it has done above and beyond. I mean, we keep talking about this on the site and on the podcast, above and beyond what other Dragon Ball games couldn't do in an entire calendar year. Ultimate Mission has done basically in a month. So we're just repeating the conversation at this point. No word on a North American or any kind of international release just yet. I constantly see people searching for it on the site, and they just keep getting these sales figures. And I'm sure it just infuriates them that they're like, I keep searching for this and I keep seeing it's doing well. Why won't you give it to me? But I guess we'll just have to stay tuned and see if there's anything coming our way. That's really it for news, other than, Julian, I guess you got to pick up this, is it Nikkei Entertainment magazine?
I have, actually.
Oh, you did pick it up?
Yes. So there's no interviews in it, but there's a series of essays by people related to the film. So there's one from Kozo Morishita, there's one from Masahiro Hosoda, there's one from Akio Ioku,
Gotcha.
editor-in-chief of V-Jump, and a couple of other people. So that's going to keep me busy well into the rest of the year.
Gotcha. What kind of magazine is this? Just kind of entertainment, news, features kind of thing?
Yeah, and the focus this issue really seems to be on not only Dragon Ball in particular, but shonen manga in general. Talking a little bit on how Jump is trying to pull its material sort of back away from fighting to an extent and more towards the male demographic. I don't know, maybe they're trying to sort of focus themselves a little bit more when they're sort of all over the place, really, with what they've got. But that kind of poses a little problem because their flagship title, One Piece, is very much fighting oriented, and it's got both male and female fans. It's square in the middle in terms of its balance for gender. So we'll see, I guess, a little bit about that, but it's interesting too.
Which is weird because all of their main series that have traditionally done well have all been action fighting oriented
with large female audiences. I mean, you go back to the Dragon Ball era is when things really started shifting. I mean, Kenshin's got a huge female fan base. Even some of the sports ones like Slam Dunk, I know, has a bunch of female fans. So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing here.
Yes, I'm not reporting on the wisdom of this particular effort. I'm just saying what I read in the magazine. I
understand that. All right. So that actually kind of wraps up the news. We got some other stuff here that, again, not really news, just kind of content. By we, I mean Julian, big overview of Kanzenshuu 3 that came out this week and all that good stuff. So with that all in mind, let us head on over to more Battle O Gods content. Our topic this week is a collection of ideas, really. It's all the stuff that went into the production of Battle of Gods, the new movie, that didn't necessarily make it into the final version or were transformed along the way, usually by Toriyama himself, before the final version of the movie. We've given you some hints, specifically last week on the show when we did Julian's first review on the movie, so definitely go back and check that out with my sinus infection self. I felt so bad listening to the show last week. I'm like, oh, I didn't even hear that. It sounded like that. I'm so sorry. But Julian, you broke down, I mean, I had an outline in my head, and you're like, that's not good enough. Here's 5 pages of stuff.
Good job.
Yeah, so I just took all the interviews that I've translated and several that I haven't got around to translating yet and just took out the pertinent bits. Everything we know about the concept that they started with scriptwriter Yusuke Watanabe's original plot for the film before Toriyama came on board to say, you know what, how about this story instead? And, we want to sort of break down what that was and where we think it might have gone and just the relative merits of each of these things.
Right. Why don't we start with this one? This is, again, something we hinted at last week, but let's go a little more in depth. And it sounded like everything about this movie hinged on these two concepts, the God of Destruction and Super Saiyan God. And there were some initial concepts for these, some of which are still in the final version, but some of which you can see where those concepts came from and why they're not the same in the movie. I almost can't describe it unless we really get in depth here. So one of them was that Beerus was going to be this evil lizard god thing that could almost infect or cast evil upon people or beings, and that was originally going to be the Saiyans. And then Super Saiyan God was tied into that. Julian, what other back history or explanation is there for this?
Well, we don't know necessarily that Super Saiyan God was tied into that, but it makes sense logically.
Got it.
Especially since we know that concept existed from the earliest stages, even before Watanabe came on board. So we could see how he maybe wanted to incorporate that there. Now, apart from that, so we know from what Yusuke Watanabe has said, he wanted to create something with some heavier themes, things like good and evil and what makes a hero, and sort of what would happen if sort of the seeds of evil were to sprout within people's hearts. And what he reports on through these different interviews is this idea that basically not only was Beerus this being who caused the Saiyans to become evil, but that basically on Earth, Goku's friends would be sort of put under his spell or come over to his side and be evil as well.
That sounds really familiar if anyone's ever seen Dragon Ball GT.
Well, I was going to say it also sounds a little bit similar to the Garlic Jr. filler arc as well.
Oh, that is true.
Infecting things. So maybe I'm glad they didn't necessarily go that route there.
That has been one complaint that we've had with previous movies in the past. You know, like Mike's favorite movie of all time, Dragon Ball Z Movie 4, we always would say, this feels like something I've seen before.
Well, I mean, all the previous movies would... I mean, if you really wanted to reduce it down, in a nutshell, they were parallels to who's the villain right now. Can we make someone similar to that and put our heroes in a situation similar to that we can wrap up in 40 minutes? This was completely different because of the scale of production, but also because the series hasn't been in production for 17 years at this point, at least the series proper. So there's a lot of that going on. This so much reminds me of all of the comments Toriyama has made, and I continue to take it back to the Bardock special, where he says, I can't tell stories that dark, and I don't like to keep it that dark. I have to put some fun and action into the mix so that it doesn't get brought down that far. But it sounds like Toriyama was interested in going that route, but not completely.
So the thing that Toriyama says, at first, the things that he's mentioned are that he was bothered by certain bits of dialogue and characterization, the kind of thing that only the original author would know. But it's clear that also he kind of didn't like the very dark tone of the story, like you said. And in particular, the thing that gets raised again and again in these interviews is the earthquake from 2 years ago.
Yeah.
That caused a massive amount of damage in the eastern part of Japan and killed, over 10,000 people. I mean, that is something that, can scar a populace. And there are towns, even, not taking into account the nuclear disaster, that were effectively depopulated by this.
Right.
So it was a very clear decision on his part that he wanted to steer away from anything that was too upsetting.
Yeah.
He didn't want it to depict serious, mass panic. He didn't want to depict destruction on a mass scale.
Right. And, I guess we should have said this earlier, but there's not going to be significant spoilers for the movie here. This is all talk of concepts and stuff that did not make it into the final version. So maybe that does color what does happen a little bit. And,
yes.
And so this is not full spoiler here, but it's safe to say you can probably assume, just because this is how Dragon Ball goes, but the Earth is not destroyed by the God of Destruction. So
yes.
there's almost this hint of we could have destroyed things, and there's a little, Beerus does destroy a little something, but it's, we do not have full-scale destruction going on.
Yes. Now, this God of Destruction concept was something that predates, apparently, Toriyama's involvement with the work.
Right.
So you have almost this sort of contradiction. Well, we have a God of destruction, but Toriyama doesn't want us to destroy anything, so what do we do?
Right.
So I think that is part of the reason why it sort of became the kind of thing that it did, where it's very much a sort of, very much nostalgic sort of feeling of a reunion of all the characters, even though they themselves are not really reuniting after that long.
It seems like that's why Beerus was changed into, or maybe not even changed, but kind of given a little bit of flavor. He's got more dimension to him.
Right. And Watanabe does mention in one of his interviews that originally he wrote Beerus as really evil, but Toriyama didn't like that approach, so he turned him into a much more, I don't know if you could call it exactly sympathetic, but something that has his own quirks, his own sort of, I don't know, human failings, except he's a god.
Right.
But,
yeah.
And not human.
Well, Toriyama even says when he first got the script, he had a bunch of notes, and instead of just telling them to change this and this, he just basically rewrote the entire thing.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's talk about that for a little bit. I mean, we do know that Yusuke Watanabe was the scriptwriter, but everything we have heard has been, yes, Toriyama, have been heavily involved. And I feel like we're almost at the point where, can we credit the script to both?
It seems that way. In fact, he mentions in the Q&A in the official movie guide, he mentions that he basically took the plot that Akira Toriyama gave him and turned it into a script. So basically, the original concept that he had was almost entirely thrown out.
Right.
Well, Toriyama even says in one of his interviews, I can't remember specifically, but he said he even included some dialogue.
Yeah.
Which is very rare for him. Usually it's just, here's a plot, and I'll let you guys write up the dialogue.
Which is similar to what we at least understand was the core idea behind the Jump Super Anime Tour special, where it's, I have this idea, Koyama and company, go.
Basically, yeah. So I do feel like maybe we should put our notes up on the site for other people to look at, since we're not specifically referencing them. But there's just so many different things all at once that it's difficult to pick out.
We've had so much
individual
backstory for this movie. It's really hard to keep track of where everything's coming from.
Well, I started to, and I'd like to flesh it out more. I'm probably going to use this podcast as my guide to it, but on the movie guide page for Battle of Gods, I did start up this kind of like rough draft ideas section. I think I only have about 3 quotes in there right now, most of which we talked about last week, but I'm going to try to expand that as we do this. But then, I mean, the page is just going to get overwhelmed, but maybe that's for the best. Maybe we just wanted to have, here's everything, go.
Yes. Well, I was just flipping down the page, and the Toriyama quote I was talking about comes from Asahi Digital.
Okay.
So that's where that's from. Where he's like, my hand would just not stop. I just kept going.
Right.
Yes. And I think we can maybe talk about Super Saiyan God a little bit at this point.
Yeah, let's go there.
It's a concept that was there. Apparently, the people who were planning on it had this idea even before Yusuke Watanabe was brought into production. They wanted something that surpasses Super Saiyan 3, or at least is like the strongest thing there is. Now, I don't know if they had decided on a time period by that point, or whether they were consciously going to ignore GT.
Right.
But they have this idea, and it appears, we don't have anything specific written about it, but that Watanabe probably wanted to tie it in with this concept of Beerus being a really evil guy, by having the Super Saiyan God being a righteous Saiyan who fought against the ones who had been turned evil. And if the concept is relatively true to the way it's presented in the film, eventually failed.
Does it sound like, and again, we're kind of reading into and inferring here, that in the past, tying these two rough draft ideas together, that Beerus infected the Saiyans and that's why they were so evil, and then the Super Saiyan God is something that he knows about because in the past, a Super Saiyan God did try to come together and gather some righteous Saiyans to save the race in a way, but it didn't work?
That seems to be the way it's going, especially because the way it's presented in the film. There's this legend among the Saya that
I've heard that before.
It's a thing, but you know, it doesn't tie into anything else. It's kind of this loose hanging plot thread that you basically have to suspend disbelief about in order for the plot to work. The way that it comes out of nowhere makes me think that it was much more closely tied into everything earlier on that was just sort of discarded.
That maybe we even would have gotten an animated flashback of the original Super Saiyan God, or at least a shadowy version. And I know I hinted at this before, but I'm really worried right now that they're going to try and tie in Bardock as now not only the original Super Saiyan, but the way that his character, I don't want to say has been changed, but they're not even taking liberties, but maybe they are. Just, he's doing righteous things. I hate to keep using that word, but he's saving these people. And is he going to stick around through time or travel through time and be there to try and save the Saiyans? I mean, he almost tried to save them in the Bardock special proper, but now as this legendary Super Saiyan, are we going to get episode of Bardock 2, Super Saiyan God?
Oh, I don't think so. Just only because it seems to be stretching things a little too far, but you never know.
Hey man, games sell. I don't know. Heath, what do you think about that? Is that, like Julian says, too far out there, or is that right in line?
Well, personally, I just think it's a terrible idea.
Oh, it's awful.
But I don't think they would stretch that far. I think that would be a huge stretch to try to pull all that together. And I think it would start to confuse a couple people. in general.
Yeah.
I think even it would confuse the anime staff.
Yeah, right. I want to pull our buddy Lance back on the show at some point, and I can never remember where he wrote it, somewhere on the forum, but he had this wonderful response about how the great thing about Bardock was that he was not special. And to glorify him in this way and in this further way and this awful idea that I'm presenting to you does kind of destroy the specialness of him not being special. So let's get Lance back on the show at some point to talk about that a little more.
And even to me, in the original Bardock TV special, it's not even so much that he's trying to save the Saiyans. He's just trying to save himself and get everybody to help him because he knows he's not strong enough.
Right.
But everyone's just like, whatever. You're batshit crazy, man.
Yes.
Hey, you're drunk, even though we're all drunk.
Yes. So there's one thing that was taken from the script. There's another thing that he mentions at one point is that originally the idea he had for everybody being on Earth at a party and then the villain coming down to Earth while Goku's not there, and oh no, they was going to have it be the wedding of Kuririn and number 18.
Right.
Now some people have suggested that, well, they're getting married an awfully long time after they had their child. Well, I think maybe originally he intended it for it to be before the Buu arc. There's this other long gap of 7 years in between the defeat of Cell and the start of the Buu arc.
There's plenty of time gaps in the series. And I mean, just going off of that, most of the children in the series appear to be bastard children. So that's not that big a deal.
Well, Goku was married by saying, let's have a marriage.
Okay, Gohan.
What does it taste
like? Goten, yes. But Trunks, no. And Pan, we didn't really know about, but no one really cared. We just assumed and onward from there.
Pan appears to be legitimate.
Well, then
now she does.
Going by what happens in Battle of Gods, but then further information that says, oh, wait, nope, yep, they're married. So, okay. I guess we're clear here for society standards.
Yes.
Whatever.
Well, it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. No one cares. Well, at least no one here.
Well, anyway, so, Goku would be dead, so he wouldn't be on Earth, and that would make sense as to why he's training with Kaio, although not on his planet. And, it would be an excuse for everybody to be getting together and celebrating something, and yes, that would be a big problem. Now, you could argue that this kind of impinges a bit on movie 9, where there's a similar situation where everybody is together, though not at a party.
Right.
And the villain comes to Earth and causes havoc, and oh no, Goku's not here, what do we do? So,
but also in addition to that, if they place it there, then we have something where do they want to surpass Super Saiyan 2 or Super Saiyan 3? Because if it's in between there, Super Saiyan 3 would not have been introduced yet.
Right. And so I think maybe that's an early concept that maybe wasn't entirely clear, but regardless, when the story came back from Akira Toriyama, it was gone and replaced by birthday party for Bulma.
What do we think about this? I mean, it ties two questions. Do we think the birthday party is a better idea for it? And do we think that back in the same time span as the Jump Super Anime Tour special was a good idea? Heath, I'll start with you.
I like the birthday party idea much better. I think it fits in a little more.
Fits her character, for sure.
Yes, very much so. And then on top of that, I mean, poor Kuririn would just be like, man, now my wedding is ruined and I can't do a damn thing about it.
But that would also be perfect for him, where it's, I just want to get married and oh, god damn it. So
poor little guy.
That could have worked.
But no, I like it as a concept idea, but I really think that the Bulma birthday party works out much better, especially for what the film ended up being and the character of Beerus. I think that totally fit him more, where he's just there casually and hanging out.
That's true. For it to be about Bulma in a variety of ways in the actual actions of characters.
You get Bulma's interaction with him, yelling at him about, oh, you're ruining my party.
Which, it could have still been if it was at the wedding, but then it wouldn't be as much about her. And I could see the same thing happening with number 18, but if you're going to go for pure nostalgia with fans, you got to go back to the character who was there at the very beginning.
Well, you have to think of the characters in this case, too, because Kuririn is the kind who frets about this sort of thing, but he'd also be the kind who wouldn't just be going up and say, you're ruining my party. Like, excuse me, sir, you're kind of ruining my parties. Could you please go? Number 18 is similarly self-centered to Bulma, but she's also sort of the cool type, and she'd be like, yeah, that guy's ruining a wedding.
Why don't you go do something?
Oh, well.
Krillin gets, some nice one-liners in about Bulma.
Yep.
So that's nice.
All right, so I think we all agree that maybe the birthday party was a better idea.
But it would make sense of the ages that some of the characters give if it were in that time frame for the wedding.
Right. That's just an oversight.
Before the Boo arc. We don't know. Yeah.
We've talked about that.
That's a good point.
Well, so after that point, I think we can maybe talk about some of the ideas that came up. Well, first on the character design side, we have Tadayoshi Yamamuro, and he's talked a bit about the ideas that he had for the character designs before Toriyama sort of said, you know what, why don't I do them?
Yeah.
So we have Beerus, who is going to be lizard-like, apparently. So not cat-like at all, but a lizard. But Toriyama instead decided to base the character on his cat, complete with mannerisms. I don't know if he owns a purple cat, but it's a Cornish Rex, which has short hair and long ears and looks vaguely similar to the villain of the film. So, I don't know. I think maybe the reptilian thing being sort of cold and very inhuman fit with the very evil approach that they had early on.
Definitely, yeah.
Whereas, cats are sort of similar to the god of destruction himself, sort of inscrutable, and they can be at turns lovable and absolutely demonic.
Right. Can speak from experience here.
Yes, both cute and diabolical.
Yes, that's a great way to describe it. Always plotting.
In that way, I think maybe the cat design was a very fitting choice for Beerus, especially in terms of the character that Toriyama rewrote him as. Now, with what is more interesting to me is maybe the initial design for Super Saiyan God, is that Tadayoshi Yamamuro is saying that originally he had this idea of something that was more massive than Super Saiyan, and with a cape, and with a hairstyle that was in between Super Saiyan 3 and 4.
I really want to know why he wanted him to have a cape. I think that's what intrigues me the most.
Just to be
because
something
heroes have capes.
Different. I mean, just so it's not just hair, I guess. I think it's interesting that they're referencing GT a little bit, going in between there.
Great Saiyaman is a cape.
Well, true, but that's kind of wacky hero as opposed to this crazy serious hero. I'd love to see any potential designs there were, just to know, kind of get a much more visual idea of what this was. What do we all think about the change here? We know from Toriyama that it was, no, I want to pare down this design to something much more simple than we've had before. And it's to the point where Goku's even thinner than he would be normally. That's how pared down it is. Heath, do you think that was a good design decision?
Well, as we've heard from many people on the forum, there's both sides to this argument. I tend to fall more on the I like it side because it is so different. It doesn't completely bulk up the character, make him super strong. To me, in my mind, this is more what a god would look like. He's fighting with godly power, not just raw power, if that makes sense. Yeah,
I hear what Yamamuro is talking about, and I start getting flashes to the terrible AF designs ever since 1997. I mean, is that what
Super
we really
Saiyan
want?
10 bro tanks.
Right. I don't want that.
And I don't want that at all. I think that would completely demean the series and in the progression that it had in these Super Saiyan stages.
Yeah.
And to take it back all the way to the basics almost, and the only thing that really changes is because his hair stays the same, it just changes color. And from what we've heard, Julian's seen it, but the fiery aura that he has is completely different than anything he's ever had before.
Right.
So I think it all works in very well to take it back almost to the beginning, because that's kind of where the story was coming from at that point, of going back to the beginning of this original Super Saiyan God.
Julian, I got to ask you, with all of those design notes in mind and what the final form or state is, do you feel like it's too similar to Kaioken?
I don't. I think it's different enough that it stands out. And the way that he fights in this form, he's not under strain the way he is in Kaioken. The Kaioken was always sort of drawn in a way that it was clear that Goku was sort of fighting with his energy in himself, that it was taking a physical toll.
Yeah.
And while it gave him brief bursts of strength and speed, it was not helping him in the long run. He needed to rely on it to defeat an opponent quickly so it wouldn't kill him instead.
Yeah.
And this is something that feels different. He feels more relaxed and natural in it. And those little mannerisms like that, I think, set it apart. And I do think that on the screen it is visually much more distinct from the Kaioken that people are suggesting. But, I guess I have a bit of a unique perspective having actually seen the film.
Right.
Now, with regards to the design itself, I think I echo Heath's opinion. And I think it is representative of the way that the story went. In particular, Gohan's own transformation, there was this whole build-up with the way that the other characters were doing. It was wrong. They kept bulking up, but all it did was slow them down. And then Gohan's transformation is actually leaner than the initial Super Saiyan transformation.
Yeah.
And while the Super Saiyan 3 is kind of something a little bit different, it does not significantly bulk Goku up that much.
That's true. Yeah.
So, and I think in that respect, it carries that through fairly well. And I know that not everyone agrees with it. I know some people look to Super Saiyan 4, which is kind of something different because it's supposed to represent the power of the Ozaru in it's sort of a compact humanoid size.
Sure.
But different strokes for different folks, I guess.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, the GT side of things where it's that it feels very much like this is a Saiyan exclusive form. Like no other race that we've seen in the series could be this, pulling in the great ape down to this human-sized thing. Whereas Super Saiyan God, I feel like anyone could kind of look like that, but it still kind of works.
Well, I think the fact that it has that sort of unassuming look is exactly what Toriyama was going for. He even says that people who look like they're supposed to be strong in his works turn out not to be.
Right. And I agree with him there, and especially the more I read from his perspective about it, where it's, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, I'm totally on board here. Okay,
so there were some other things in the script writing stage where, you have... so Toriyama's coming out with these ideas, but... at least Watanabe felt they weren't long enough to make into a movie. So he decided to write this little subplot where these thieves come in and attempt to steal the Dragon Balls. But when Toriyama took a look at it, he said, well, we're having basically the whole cast in here, so why don't we make it Pilaf and Company? And so he thought, oh yeah, okay, and he wrote it in that way. And it's interesting in that in making this little change, you have this whole subplot where basically Pilaf and Company are turned into children because of an errant wish on the dragon. And it's interesting how they really managed to sort of put this focus on the characters and their own interactions. Particularly at one point, because Watanabe mentions how basically they are not really relevant to the overarching plot. And yet they feel so natural in the film, and that's something that is maybe something that only Toriyama would be able to do.
Yeah.
Just incorporating these characters in such a way that even though they aren't really relevant to the main plot, they feel like they belong.
You know what I think is... I hate to just say interesting. I feel like we've said that so much. I heard myself say it so many times last episode. I need a better word for it. But Watanabe was saying that he was able to jump into the script and even be able to write lines of dialogue for characters as a fan, just knowing exactly what they would say because he's been so entrenched in Dragon Ball all his life. That this is the kind of concept that he just totally missed this opportunity here. And it did take the original author to come in and say, hey, why don't you do this? And it's kind of one of those duh moments. Why wouldn't you use Pilaf instead of random one-off characters?
Yes. Well, Toriyama also mentioned how they've been getting pretty old at this point. And, you go another 10-ish years into the future if you want to include GT, and they're really old.
Yeah, but who cares? That's still hysterical.
But yeah, and I think that's why they're kids too.
Right.
So, it is an enjoyable aspect of the movie, and you don't feel like they're wasting time at all doing this. So, yeah, I think that basically covers the whole subplot with Pilaf, and we've talked about the plot implications in past episodes, but there was apparently a suggestion in the original scenario on the part of Akira Toriyama where he wanted the God of Destruction to defeat everyone using a spoon or a fork. Now, as hilarious as this would have been, the animation supervisor, Tadayoshi Yamamuro, felt that this was just not something that he could do. A fork is dangerous and would be difficult to choreograph a fight in which he didn't, stab somebody with it.
That's true.
Stab some eyes, pull them out.
Yeah.
So he decided to change it into chopsticks instead. And so you got this little sort of, not even acrobatic, but just sort of very, almost very graceful sequence in which he uses the chopsticks to throw Tenshin Han and defeat Piccolo effortlessly, and I forget what he does with, I think he chops number 18 on the back of the neck.
Yeah, stops her in midair or something, and then, yeah.
Yeah, so he's just using these chopsticks like, oh yeah, okay, back to eating.
Right.
That's sort of, he defeats them like he's not even trying. And that, I think the chopsticks decision was actually quite effective.
Yeah, I like that. It's this unassuming implementation thing going on.
Yes, although I think the spoon would have been hilarious.
Yeah, that too, but then you also get this blunt spoon that you could stab and scoop out guts with, so let's not go there.
Okay.
But Julian, I do want to talk more about other characters. A lot of people, at least those that have seen the film, which is only people in Japan, but also those reading along with our detailed synopsis, have said, hey, the other characters, I mean, I guess they get screen time, but there's nothing in the way of, say, One Piece, where all the side characters get squared off against someone. They each get their own little time to shine. There's not really anything like that here. You just said everyone jumps in and gets defeated with chopsticks pretty much immediately. But
apparently there was. Yes. So what he says in terms of that development in the official movie guide, he says, it was my first experience with writing the scenario, so what I understood the least was I had no grasp of how much writing would translate to how much length on screen. So I thought that the anime staff would further expand on the script I'd supervised, but it seems the scenario was actually so long that it had to be cut down. They told me that in the first storyboards, they had already cut it down somewhat, but it was still over 2 hours long.
Oh my goodness, okay.
Yes, and then Masahiro Hosoda, in a separate interview in the same official movie guide, which despite being slim is just jam-packed with interviews, so I recommend that pretty well. So he talks about just working with the staff members, and he's saying, he was able to leave a lot of it to them because some of them had been working on the series longer than he had. But he says only in the end we expanded the scenarios too much, and at the storyboarding phase we had already gone very much over the intended length. So as a result we cut down quite a bit. In the scenario, the Z Warriors played a larger role, so I would have liked to put more of that to video if possible. Each of them, the video, I mean the moving pictures.
Yes.
It's not implying that he's going to put it into a home release. I should put that out there. Anyway, if possible. Each of them has their fans, after all, and I think they've all trained and gotten stronger. Also, he shortened the breaks in the fight and such, and managed to just barely get it within the allotted time. So, contrary to what you expect, I think concentrating it made it more impressive. So, it has this situation where, okay, there apparently were scripted fights, but they had an allotted length that they needed to adhere to. I'm not sure whose decision that was. It might have been the animation studios. It might have been a time, production time consideration.
From everyone. Yeah.
So that they could have included these things, but, it would have made the movie much longer. It would have made, from what we've heard about the way that the fights were choreographed, it would have been a much greater expenditure of effort and time and money, and it would have probably delayed the movie, frankly, because we can talk about a little bit of the choreography. Again, maybe you can add something to this first.
Yeah, we'll hold off on that. So Heath, here's my question to you based on this whole thing. As someone who has only read a text description of the movie, do you feel that you wanted this extra material in here, or does it sound like it would have kind of taken away from just how compact the rest of the story being told was.
I think, if any, they could have had just a short 5 minutes or something like that, but how would you get all the characters in? And I think at that point, you have to compromise of, well, do we just do these or do we do everyone? And when it comes to budget, and especially this series with what we've seen over the last couple years, I think they were very hesitant to do anything like that.
They got to be careful.
Especially delay the movie.
They couldn't.
And,
they had that.
And I believe that was a very big possibility because we've, I don't know, maybe we shouldn't say it, but we've heard rumblings from other people in Japan that have talked to some of the staff and have said there were times where they weren't sure they were going to get it out the door.
It was tight.
Time.
It was
so,
tight.
Yeah, if you start doing a lot more, especially with animation,
yep,
where you got to sit down and you have to choreograph all this stuff, I mean, that takes days.
Yeah, that's not something that you can cheap out on. I mean, it would be obvious, and even if you do cheap out on it, it's still raw time. So my question, I guess not to anyone in particular, but is, so including all these characters and having them do more stuff, I think Jake even mentioned something like this in the giant forum thread. All right, so what does that accomplish?
Exactly.
It just has everyone jump in and get beat. Is that interesting? Not really.
I mean, I guess if that's what people really want to see is their favorite character jump in to get their ass kicked.
Right.
I guess, are they really your favorite character?
I personally think it kind of takes away from the impressiveness of the villain. The whole idea is that, you know, he is already effortlessly defeated Goku as Super Saiyan 3. Nobody is going to be able to hold their own against him. That's a given. Far better for them to just, you know, jump in
and then that's
immediately get, you know, he's not even trying. He's just using chopsticks like, get out of my way. Shoot.
Right.
Well, even I think it really builds up to the point where you have Vegeta attacks him, loses, and being one of the other strongest characters in the series at that point, where he just admits defeat and says it would be an honor to be killed by you.
And even then, at least Beerus kind of raises an eyebrow like, oh, well, that was almost something, but that was the extent of it. Like, no one else. No one.
Well, we can talk a little bit about the choreography.
Okay.
That, we talked about this a little bit at the beginning, that with Toriyama putting this constraint on them, that he did not want depictions of mass panic or destruction on a large scale.
Right.
That they really had to sort of work around this. And one of the things that they did, according to the director, was that they sort of planned out this elaborate sequence where, okay, they're going to start at Capsule Corporation, they're going to move on to a forest and a wasteland and a lake and then underground and into space, and using CG to accomplish a lot of that.
Well, they do go through a city at one point, but they don't hit anything and no one gets hurt.
Yes, so they're moving around very quickly, and they're using a lot of CG in terms of the quote-unquote camera following the action. And it's very interesting that the reaction of the people, since they don't know what's going on, is like, oh, there's fireworks at Capsule Corporation or something. I don't know. You know, they don't know what's going on. But that's all very deliberate, and I think they relied very heavily on the visual effects and the use of CG here in order to create a sense of sort of dramatic composition and to make the fight impressive, almost as much because nobody gets killed as for the lack of as in spite of it, you know?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there will be people arguing that it would have upped the drama, and, well, yeah, I guess, kind of.
Do we need that, though? I mean, Boo's already destroyed the Earth. We're good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it would really serve a purpose. And, frankly, you know, we know that he's the god of destruction. He could destroy the Earth in the blink of an eye, and, you know, what purpose would it serve? I mean, mass destruction, but in this case, it would be relatively small scale compared to what we know from the outset that he is capable of doing and could do if his mood goes that way. So, yeah.
You even have, I think, for Toriyama's sake, on top of just the earthquake disaster, it seems to be something that he's always tried to do almost in every arc of the story.
What, threaten the entire planet?
Yeah, well, no, move all the battles away.
Oh, yeah.
From, the general populace of the Earth. The only time we really see anything that's massive destruction like that is, well, either filler in the Cell Arc when the army tries to attack, or when Majin Buu wipes everybody out.
Well, I was going to say Piccolo Daimao was also destroying.
If you destroy buildings, you have to draw the destroyed buildings, and then
Exactly.
you have to keep track of where the destroyed buildings are, and then didn't want to deal with that. Completely destroy the city or move them somewhere else.
But I also think that it's nice within the movie that we end up in a bunch of different scenes, and we're not just the entire thing is just at Capsule Corp.
Yeah, that's true.
So I think that kind of adds to it a little.
So we've talked a whole lot about these initial ideas for the movie and how that changed what the story of the movie was going to be and really shaped this final product, Battle of Gods, as an 85-minute movie. We have one little extra tidbit here that really has nothing to do with the plot or the characters of the movie, except maybe it has a little bit to do with one character.
Yes. So we can talk a little bit about Son Goku. And it's kind of this throwaway reference that's within the interview that Nozawa gave for DVD and Blu-ray Vision. But she's talking about that after she saw the screening, the test screening of the movie together with Akira Toriyama, he sort of posed this question to her, well, do you charge a high rate for your services? And she says, no, why? And apparently the producer brought Toriyama in spite of his request to have Nozawa as Goku as she has always been.
I mean, he selected her.
Yes. So, well, we've auditioned these other people, and could you take a look at them? And obviously Toriyama stood firm and had Nozawa as Goku, as we can expect of him and the production. But apparently they were considering, to the point where they had actually auditioned people. I don't know if they knew that they were auditioning specifically for that role, but just that they had these audition tapes for other people to play Goku. And as much as they didn't have any of that, you can feel a recurring theme in all the things that Nozawa has said, that she wants to keep playing Goku and go down into the Guinness Book of Records together with him. And I think that means for longevity in terms of her life,
right.
Not just playing the character.
She is Goku. I mean, everything she says, everything Toriyama says is, no, these two are inextricably linked. They are one and the same.
Yes, and I think it is very much her intention to play the character until she dies. And I don't know, it almost seems to be her saying these things as a way to sort of snip back at whoever made that executive decision, like, no, I am here.
I'm not going anywhere.
Yes. And now there's this interview in the magazine Weekly Asahi, which I'm still transcribing because it's so long, but she brings up a number of interesting points about how, well, she's not as flawless as she used to be. She flubs lines, and she sometimes says things that aren't in the script that they will occasionally use out of courtesy to her. But, even so, she's been at this a really long time, and she has no intention of giving any ground. And I think still she is head and shoulders above a lot of people who are new in the industry. But she's been around from the very beginning. I mean, she was in the original Astro Boy, not as the title character, but she was there. She was the original Doraemon. She was Rascal the Raccoon, Tom Sawyer, all of these things through the history of Japanese animation, basically. And from her perspective, at least, she's here to stay. But you almost have these rumblings in the background of business end of things. They're making contingency plans. And I think that is really unsettling, because to me, that would have made it a very different film, even if nothing else had changed other than Goku's voice.
Yep.
The whole theme of the movie is it being almost like a reunion for the cast, for the characters. And if they had actually gone and changed the voice, I think that would have sort of undermined everything.
Mm-hmm. Completely agreed.
I don't know what else there is to add to that, but
just that you could add in Toria's comment of, well, I thought they did that because you were so expensive. She just laughed at him.
Well,
yes.
I mean, there's a very morbid conversation we could get into where it's, Julian, you used the word contingency before, where it's, we got to get ready for, I mean, this is happening soon.
Well, she's 76 going on 77, right?
But I think this is not the time.
I think it is valid that maybe they should be somewhat prepared, but not to the extent of, well, she's still around, she can do it, let's get rid of her. That's, yeah, nobody wants to go there.
All right, let's leave that alone. That's a sad thing to end on. So let's just kind of recap, regroup. We've learned where Battle of Gods came from in the rough draft idea scene. We know what the final version is. Julian, I'll start with you as the only one of the three of us that has seen the movie. Were most, if not all, of the decisions made that changed things or adapted things for the final version, were they for the best?
I think, all things considered, it did result in a stronger movie. There are a couple of loose hanging threads, like the whole Super Saiyan God thing, which isn't bad in itself, but the backstory feels like it's a remnant of an earlier draft where it was much more integral to the plot. But other than that, I think the changes that resulted from Toriyama being involved in the movie, and also a few of the adjustments made on the production end by the director and by the animation supervisor, really resulted in a stronger movie with a more interesting plot that gets away from the standard formula a bit. And which I really liked. I mean, I've said it before, there are people on the forum who have a variety of opinions, and I can understand at least some of them if that's not really your thing. But I feel like this is the kind of thing where even people, if they don't like the overall idea of the film, they can still take away something from it. That I think I said in the last episode, if this does not put a smile on your face at some point in it, then maybe you need to re-examine your priorities.
Heath.
Oh man, how do you follow that up? Because
you can just say yes.
I almost completely agree with everything that Julian said, because that's really what it comes down to, especially the latter part that he discussed. I mean, you have to come out of this with a smile, and it's got Toriyama just oozing out of it.
All right, so let me interrupt you then. If it's going to be the same thing, then let me change the question.
Okay.
Is everything we've talked about and how much we've talked about the movie, are we putting too much importance and lavish praise on it for what it's done?
I don't think so. I mean, yeah, part of it is, the whole nostalgia factor just comes out.
And it's new.
And that's kind of hard. Yeah, that's kind of hard to avoid. And I'm just reading it and writing things.
Yeah, I know.
I can't wait to see it. But other than that, I think as far as the Toriyama part, I think it really turned out to be very crucial.
Yeah, we
to
keep
have
coming
his
back
involvement.
to that.
I'm really hoping that Watanabe learned a little from it, maybe how to think about the storytelling more from Toriyama's standpoint, and we can see more things like this in the future. I just don't know what else to say, because it seems like such a great movie for not having seen it, and that's what is very hard.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, it's tough. All right, well, let's bring this episode to a close then. I love all the material we've been able to cover, and I hope to more concisely adapt this into text you can refer to as well. But I love talking and hashing this stuff out. It's what I think the podcast does really well, and gives us all a chance to come together on that. So I'm just so much in love with Dragon Ball and doing the show and doing the websites. It all just makes me happy. So Julian, I did come away with a smile. So is that all right?
I am glad to hear that, sir.
All right, good.
I think if anything, it's just nice that we have all of this background information almost instantaneously.
I know
that even though we haven't seen the film yet, we can have these types of discussions and inform people about it, and really dig deep into things that we've never really been able to before.
Yeah, insert general spiel of 2013 is not 1996.
Yes.
All right, so let's bring it to a close. Next week on the show, I always hate saying what the plan is going to be, because the plan will invariably change if I announce that there will be a plan. I would like to cover the Dream 9 Super Collaboration Special next week if Julian can catch it locally, and onward from there. So that's a plan. There are other plans as well. So let's just look forward to the future of 2013 and Dragon Ball. So Heath, thank you for joining us after a rockin' evening you had.
Well, thanks for having me. I hope I brought my C game, maybe. I don't know.
All right. So we'll call you C game Hujio. Let's call him A game Jedi of the Saiyans. I don't know.
Okay.
It's weird. I never use screen names with you. You've always just been Julian to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't use it really on the forum either.
No.
I'm just Julian.
I think I knew
any
you
of
too
us
soon.
really use screen names anymore.
When people refer to me by my screen name on the forum, it takes me a minute before I realize they're addressing me.
I know.
And I think, oh, yeah, that's me.
Well, thank you. I know it's late over there in Japan, and tomorrow's a Monday, so that means a weekly jump. So go to bed.
Oh, okay. Well, I will talk to you tomorrow morning then.
All right. Well, send me your audio before you go to bed. So we got
All right.
Heath over there. We got Julian over there. My name is Mike VegettoEX. This is episode 329 of our podcast at Kanzenshuu, which, by the way, is a year old now.
I know. I can't believe it.
We've been so busy that there was no way for us to celebrate we did the new launch of the combined fusion a year ago. It's just kind of, whoop, okay,
Yes.
I guess we hit that milestone.
Yeah.
Yes, our April Fool's joke was that we were too busy for April Fool's.
Yes. We apologize to everyone that anticipated something. You know how things go.
Pretend that for one day we announced our separation back into Kanzentai and VegettoEX, and that we had dummy URLs where you could go and view Kanzenshuu using special CSS that converted it back to our old clunky layouts.
So next year's plan.
Okay.
All right. So, folks, it's been a pleasure. This is 329. See you next week for 330. Julian, wrap it up.
All right. Well, thank you for listening to yet another insightful and heated discussion on Kanzenshuu, the podcast, your one-stop source for all sorts of Dragon Ball news on the internet and into your ears. So stay tuned for next episode.